Well, I've used the term national divorce, and my words got twisted around. I used national divorce for a reason because that's a court process. That is a legal process of dividing.
So once again, Marjorie Taylor Greene is at it, not making any sense at all, but being a very assertive while doing it.
But I did not want it to be mixed up with civil war or secession, and I'll tell you why. When I talk about a national divorce, I talk about states having more state rights. And I talk about the federal government being completely shrunk down more towards where it should have been and where it started out. Yeah.
Kind of like those guys.
Yeah, they kind of knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And they warned us of a lot of the serious problems that we're seeing today. I think we maintain a military. We've got to protect our borders. We definitely need to stay the United States of America. But many Republicans, many conservatives have gotten so fed up with the left's ideas. The climate change lies. I'm sorry, we don't want to give up our gas stoves. We like to be able to buy a gas or diesel fueled combustion engine vehicle. We don't want to be forced onto electric. I mean, we might choose to buy it, but we don't want to be forced.
Yep.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene has proposed this idea of a national divorce, but is now following up saying that it's definitely not seceding, and it's also definitely not a civil war. And I really have to ask, what on God's green earth does she actually mean? Well, she tried to clarify saying it just means a much smaller government that's not going to take away our gas stoves. And so, good news, I guess. They're not taking your gas stoves away. They just put out an advisory saying that, like, hey, if you have a gas stove, that might expose you and your family to, like, potential risks. It's not even a climate change thing like Marjorie Taylor Greene suggested. But on top of this, we have to recognize how little sense this makes. They want a small government just like the founding fathers intended. You know, the very small government that George Washington used the military to force a state to pay taxes. That small government, it's just utterly nonsensical. And the reason why Republicans say that they want a small government is because fundamentally what they actually want is for large corporations to have more power. Because that's really what it would mean. The whole notion of small government doesn't mean that individual states would have more rights. It would mean large corporations would have a larger role in regulating the economy themselves. They're talking about privatizing things like roads, privatizing things like schools, right? Privatizing basically anything to the point where we get to all live in company towns again. Which I guess is fitting with the trend that's happening because they're also in the middle of bringing child labor back. So why not just have a blast from the past, you know? Child labor, company towns, what's next? But that's it, really. Republicans can't really say what they support, right? They have to use these ridiculous terms and they invent all of these things. And it's also worth noting, when did Republicans all of a sudden decide that they want small government? Because this is actually very, very important. You see, there were plenty of Republicans that were totally on board with a large federal government up until a certain point. And golly gee, when was that? Oh yeah, that's right. It was the Civil Rights Act is when all of a sudden these Republicans are like, no, we need a small federal government. You know, back when the federal government all of a sudden decided, hey, you know what? I think segregation is bad and we should force all of these states to end segregation and maybe we should do some things to make overt racism from government institutions illegal. That is the very moment that Republicans all of a sudden decided that they hated the federal government. That right there. Because at the end of the day, it's really just racism that drives these Republican states. It is really racism that drives these individual Republicans. Because if you look at some of the biggest conflicts between red states and the federal government, you see it's because they want to do things like ban gender-affirming care for trans people, ban gay marriage, right? Even in some cases banning interracial marriage. Fundamentally, these right-wing states want to violate people's basic human rights. And they are angry that the federal government is doing literally not even the bare minimum to protect those rights. That is what this is fundamentally all about. It's not about gas stoves. It's not about Budweiser. It's not about the woke moralists in California taking over. It's because fundamentally these Republicans are just racist and they want to have their way to discriminate against whoever they want. They want to criminalize the existence of queer people, right? They want to force black and brown folks to live as second-class citizens. That is what these Republicans want. That's why they talk about national divorce. That's why they know it's silly quickly to talk about secession. And when you really pry into what exactly it is these conservatives want, it's just flat out bigotry. And ultimately, it is bigotry in the service of large, wealthy corporations that see the notion of a small federal government as an opportunity to come in with a brand new business venture of company towns and child labor and a litany of other horrors beyond our reasoning. Because heaven forbid we have some type of government that is powerful enough to deal with giant corporations.